Let's go straight away to Professor Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. And a few issues I want to get to with you, Professor. Thanks so much for joining us today. But let's start with the hottest topic, which is Kavanaugh. And you've had some interesting takes on it that I've seen that I want to unpack for our audience. But overall, can you give me your 30,000-foot view of what you think is taking place in the American media right now?
Well, I think people are just choosing sides, and civil libertarians on the left are ignoring the civil liberties and legal rights of Kavanaugh, and Republicans on the right are being less than completely sensitive toward the rights of the alleged accuser. It's obvious what should happen. She should testify first, make the accusation, lay it out, and then he should be asked to respond. In the meantime, there should be an ongoing FBI background check looking into all of these allegations. This is what the FBI normally does, not a criminal investigation, but a background check where they don't assess the credibility of people, just present to the Senate all the possible witnesses that might help elucidate this issue. There should be no time frame. The Republicans want to do it very quickly. The Democrats want to stall until after the election. The investigation should take as long as it takes, and as soon as it's over, if a vote is called for, there should be a vote. But civil liberties have to be complied with, and the ACLU, we don't hear from them. When the accuser's lawyer says that the accused has to go first, that's such a fundamental denial of due process, the way they used to do it in the Star Chamber. You call somebody in, have him deny everything, and then you bring in the accuser afterward. That's just not the way the Anglo-American system of justice has ever worked.
Yeah, there's already so much there that I want to drill down on. But first of all, the concept of civil liberties, it does seem to only be we're only seeing it applied to one side. And perhaps, and I've always had this conceit on the show for the last week and a half that we've been dealing with this, that there is a possibility this accuser's story is 100% accurate. I'm not discounting that as a possibility, but you've got a lifetime of evidence suggesting that this is not in the character of Brett Kavanaugh, yet he has been convicted by at least half of our media, if not more already, in the public square. And his accuser, who we have not heard from, is being seen as this sort of is sacrosanct here. And I find that to be disingenuous.
It's absurd. And what you have is the media on the left calling her a victim and calling her a survivor. We don't know whether that's true. It may very well be true. And calling him a perpetrator. And we don't know whether that's true. The presumption of innocence has to still apply. You know, men and women are not born with a genetic predisposition either to lie or tell the truth. There's no gender-specific gene for lying. Women lie, men lie. Women tell the truth, men tell the truth. Women make mistakes, men make mistakes. People forget. We have to get to the bottom of this without a political agenda here. We have to find out the truth. We don't want somebody serving on the Supreme Court who has lied to Congress and may have engaged in this kind of conduct, but we don't want somebody denied an opportunity to serve on the Supreme Court if he's being falsely accused.
Now, and I opened the show talking about how the presumption of innocence is dead here, but I think people who would disagree with us would suggest that presumption of innocence only applies to a court of law. It's different for public opinion. I disagree with that, but I want to get your reaction to that.
No, I think that we always have to presume everybody innocent of a charge until we've heard the evidence, whether it be in a court of law, whether it be an employment case, whether it be just in the court of public opinion. You just can't presume people are guilty because it's a woman. You know, these people chanting outside of Congress, we believe her, we believe her, we believe Anita Hill, we believe, you know, you have to hear the evidence. And the evidence is what determines whether or not you believe something. Now, you're going to come into the evidence with a predisposition. If you're a feminist, you're obviously going to be predisposed to try to believe the person. But if she's then caught in a series of contradictions, you might change your mind. The same is true for the accused. Whatever presumption you may start out with may change when you hear the evidence. But the one thing that's clear, it would be outrageous to have him testify first and her testify only in response. And I want to hear from the American Civil Liberties Union on that issue. For years and years, they've talked about a due process of law, and due process can't apply only to Democrats and not to Republicans. At the same time this is going on, we have Keith Ellison, who is about to become the chief law enforcement officer of Minnesota, having served as deputy director of the Democratic National Committee, and he's being accused of spousal abuse. The woman has produced some contemporaneous records, and there ought to be an inquiry there too. And the truth has to come out in all these instances.
And you have a good perspective on this because I consider you one of the few liberals out there, people who are not on the right, but people who are not necessarily on the left, as sort of a traditional liberal. And so your statement that it is sort of absurd to suggest that this woman, Dr. Ford, is to be considered fully credible, that people should just believe her just because she has victim status. I find that strange credulity. And the same way that you'll hear, I have not heard a lot of people on the right say, for sure, Brett Kavanaugh is innocent. I think most of us, including the president, has conceded maybe there is something to it. We want to hear about it. We're willing to hear some sort of investigation or testimony or whatever it is. But you're getting on the left. We played this video from these Hollywood celebrities just saying over and over again how she's a victim. We believe her, and the media is not pushing back on that, and I find that disheartening.
Well, they have to push back on it. And the idea that you can lose your job, your livelihood, and according to some people, go to jail based on the uncorroborated statement of somebody who hasn't testified under oath is absurd. They're now calling for a criminal investigation going back 35 years because there's no statute of limitations for rape or attempted rape. But, rape requires a specific intent to penetrate, not just to grope. There are so many possibilities of what happened here, ranging from complete and total innocence, he was never there, it's the wrong person, it never happened, to complete and total guilt, he did it, and it was horrible and inexcusable. Putting your hands over the mouth of a woman to stop her from screaming is a horrible, horrible thing. To somewhere in between, maybe they were making out. Who knows? It's impossible to know. We have to hear the evidence.
Okay,
on all sides. Yeah.
So, Professor, let's talk about what an FBI investigation would look like, because you're a guy who spent his lifetime thinking about issues of the law. My life has not been nearly as long, nor have I spent nearly as much time thinking about the law. I have don't have the foggiest idea what an FBI investigation would look like.
Let me tell you what it would look like.
Please.
It's a background investigation. So it's already been conducted. They've already conducted a background investigation of Kavanaugh. They've gone to everybody who's known him, everybody who's shared dorm spaces with him, everybody who's been in his class, and they've asked all kinds of questions, and they just take careful notes. Now, with this allegation, they would expand that investigation. They would try to find the name of the person who owned the home. They would try to interview that person if they're still alive, find out if they had any knowledge of a party taking place, maybe find out if there were any other people, if anybody talked about it. There's some things they could do. Are they going to find anything definitively? If you ask me, I would say almost certainly not. In the end, almost certainly this will be a she said, he said, with maybe a few people corroborating her, namely her therapist, her husband, but they only heard about it afterward, and a few people corroborating him, his friend Judge, the guy, we'll have to find out also about his drinking. That's a relevant factor when you're being nominated to be a justice. He's kind of acknowledged that he had a drinking problem as an adolescent. He wouldn't be the only person who did. Has that drinking problem persisted? I have seen no evidence of it, but we should know about that. If he was a blackout drunk as a 17-year-old, and then he described some events at Yale Law School when he was probably 23, 24, 25, we have a right to ask him that question about what his drinking situation is now, whether he's been to Alcoholics Anonymous, whether he's in touch with this guy Judge, who apparently has been in an alcohol program. These are all relevant factors for anybody's qualification to serve as a justice of the Supreme Court.
Sure, but I'm not hearing anything that would disqualify the guy and disqualify his 36 years of what we have on record about him at this point, unless we get, as you noted, if we get that he literally did attempt rape and it did, and the woman was really concerned that she was going to get killed because he was he was suffocating her, which is the most extreme and I think pretty far-fetched, but still possible explanation for what happened. Short of that, I don't know if we're hearing enough to disqualify the process. But the left has put this out, Professor, that this has been rushed. In your viewpoint, has this all been rushed?
Well, I'd like to see more time taken now. Now that we have some information, some willingness to testify, let's take our time. I'm not saying we should take our time to put it past the midterms. I don't think politics should enter into this. I don't think the Democrat goal to put it beyond the midterm should enter into it. nor the Republican goal of getting it done before the midterm. I think the investigation has to proceed apace professionally, and let's come to some conclusions about that. I think the hardest question is going to be if a senator comes to the conclusion that something like this may have happened, but it's 35 years old, we're not sure what it was, he's led an exemplary life, do you confirm or don't you confirm? Well, the president, does he withdraw or doesn't he withdraw? These are going to be the hard questions. Look, she may come across extremely credibly, extremely plausibly, and then the president has a hard decision to make, and the nominee has a hard decision to make. And
sure, but we're hearing that she was going to testify. It was game on, that it was the Republicans who didn't want her to testify. Then the Republicans are giving her an option to testify in public or private now. And then now it seems like the left keeps moving the goalposts. The Democrats keep moving the goalposts. I can't even keep track of where they are now, what is being requested, what is being demanded by the Democratic side.
Some of the things are perfectly reasonable. Some of the things are reasonable. Make sure that she has absolute safety and security. That's obviously reasonable.
Fair.
But to make sure that everybody else who's a potential witness is compelled to testify, that's reasonable. It's not reasonable at all. And what really destroys the credibility of some of the other reasonable claims is this demand that he go first. It's just impossible to imagine a legal system that is anything consistent with the rule of law, which puts the accused on the stand first before the accuser takes the stand. It's just inconceivable that should happen.
Did you have a timeline in your head where you think that it's how long this should go on?
Yeah, I mean, I think she probably should testify sometime next week. While she is preparing to testify, the FBI should be doing a background check. They should be subpoenaing any potential witness. And I can imagine that by the end of next week or the latest beginning of the week after, we might be ready to reach some conclusion. So
perfectly reasonable. And I say this as editor of Hard Right Breitbart News. I'm being somewhat using the bunny ears around Hard Right. It sounds perfectly reasonable. If we did that, I think the whole country, aside from the political operatives, would be pretty much fine with that. And then we could all move on. Professor Alan Dershowitz is with me, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor, we have a couple minutes left together. I want to ask you about a couple other issues, in particular, your book. Do you think impeachment really is on the docket right now for the Democrats? They're certainly promising their base that, and if it is, why do you think it's give us in a nutshell the case against it?
Well, it wouldn't be constitutional. You need to have a crime, treason, bribery, other high crimes and misdemeanors. Maxine Waters says no, it's anything the House wants it to be, and she not only wants to impeach Trump, she wants to impeach Pence as well. So, the framers never intended impeachment to be an attempt to rid people of somebody they didn't vote for. There's a backstop, and the backstop is it requires one of specified crimes, and I've seen no evidence of any specified crimes. And if he were to be impeached for something other than criminal behavior, it would be unconstitutional. And I'm not sure that he would accept it. And, imagine the constitutional crisis. If he were impeached for maladministration of office and then removed, and then he said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm sorry. You didn't follow the Constitution. I'm an independent branch of the government. I read the Constitution. The Constitution requires a crime. You haven't accused me of a crime. I'm not leaving. What happens then? Does the Senate send its armed guards to get him out of the White House? It would then have to go to the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court would read the Constitution as it was written, requiring a crime as a prerequisite for impeachment and removal. That's the thesis of my book. I lay out all these hypothetical possibilities in the book, and I would have written the same book had Hillary Clinton been elected. In fact, my publishers have a mock cover of the book, A Case Against Impeaching Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
Had she been elected, they would have tried to impeach her, and I would have written exactly the same book.
Yes, and or perhaps we could create a new constitutional amendment where it is a crime to be Donald Trump, which is what it seems like day in and day out.
Or a crime to be Hillary Clinton.
Or a crime to be Hillary Clinton. Let's be fair. Okay, so Professor, last question for you today, and again, thanks for all your time on Breitbart News Daily. I want to get your thoughts, and you are, as I know, a liberal, not a leftist. Do you think the Democrats? You've been a Democrat, I think, most of your life. Do you think they're blowing it right now with the promise? Yeah. But with are they over-promising for the resistance? Are they pandering too far to the left? Give us your thoughts.
I think some are. Look, there are some centrist Democrats. Look Bloomberg wants to run as a Democrat. Joe Biden is a centrist Democrat. But you have people who want to turn the Democratic Party into the Sanders Party, or the party of these young people who have now won elections, tiny, tiny little elections with a few thousand votes, but who call themselves Democratic Socialists. They call themselves progressives, but they're on the wrong side of free speech. They're on the wrong side of tolerance. They're on the wrong side of many issues. And as somebody who is a liberal, I love to debate with conservatives like Bill Buckley. We used to have great debates. But my arch enemies in the world are not conservatives. They are the hard left. And just like I think conservatives, centrist conservatives, ought to have as their arch enemies the alt-right, the neo-Nazi right, small group to be sure, but the conservatives have to fight those extremists. We liberals have to fight the extremists on the left. We have to move the party more toward the center, where good old liberals debate good old conservatives, and Americans see a choice at near or around the center. That's what I think Americans are craving, and that's why I think the Democrats lost the last election and will continue to lose unless they move more and more away from the fringes and toward the center.
Professor Alan Dershowitz, pick up the case against impeaching Trump. Thanks so much for the time, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. Be well. Thank you.
All right. We'll take a quick break, wrap up with your calls on Breitbart News Daily.